A McDonald's worker hands over a simple bag of food, no charge, no questions. But what seems like a small act of kindness suddenly explodes into chaos when corporate steps in and fires them on the spot. The customer? A high-profile figure who doesn't take the news lightly. What she does next leaves everyone stunned, and no one saw it coming. Stay tuned. This story is about to take a wild turn. At a fast food restaurant like McDonald's, employees are expected to follow very clear rules. These rules help the business run smoothly and fairly. One of the most important rules in many food service jobs is that no food should be given away for free unless there is permission from a manager or some special event happening. This rule exists for many reasons. It protects the company from losing money, helps ensure that all customers are treated equally, and keeps things fair among workers. When one employee breaks this rule, it can create a difficult situation for everyone else. In this case, a McDonald's employee made a personal decision to offer free food to someone. It may have seemed like a kind or simple act, but the company viewed it differently. From the business's point of view, the employee gave away company property without permission. Even though it was just food, and probably not very expensive, it still went against official policy. Companies like McDonald's keep close watch on their inventory. Everything from burgers to fries is counted and tracked. Giving away food without logging it or charging for it means the system becomes unbalanced. When this happens, it can lead to questions during audits or checks. The employee may have believed they were doing something good or harmless, especially if the food was offered to someone who is well known or respected. However, good intentions do not always match company rules. In many corporations, the policy is strict. No unauthorized free items, no matter who the customer is. When employees are hired, they often go through training where they learn these rules. During this training, they are usually warned that breaking such rules can lead to serious consequences, including termination. Once the action was noticed, management had a decision to make. Supervisors or store leaders have a duty to report any rule breaking, especially when it involves money or products. In fast food businesses, discipline is usually consistent, because if one person is allowed to break the rule, others may expect the same freedom. This can lead to larger issues over time. So, to protect the system and send a message to other staff, the company chose to fire the employee. Firing someone is never a light decision. It affects their income, their future job, options, and their reputation. But companies also have to think about fairness and consistency. If they allow one worker to break the rules without consequences, other workers may feel that the rules do not matter. That can lower morale and reduce trust in management. In this case, the employee's action, while possibly done with good intent, was seen as breaking trust with the company. The situation became even more complex because the person who received the free food was not just any customer. That fact brought more attention to the incident than usual. However, from the company's point of view, it did not matter who the food was given to. The rule was broken, and that alone was enough for them to take action. This kind of event teaches a larger lesson about professional responsibility. When working in a company, especially a large one like McDonald's, every action is connected to a policy. It might not always feel important in the moment, but every small decision can have big consequences. Giving away food might feel like a personal or emotional decision, but in the eyes of the employer, it is a business decision that affects operations, costs, and fairness. Employees in food service are often under pressure to move fast, serve politely, and make quick decisions. This sometimes leads them to rely on their own judgment rather than stopping to think about every rule. But judgment and policy can come into conflict. When they do, the company almost always chooses to protect its rules. That is what happened. Here, the firing of this employee shows how even one action done in seconds can change a person's entire work situation. It's a reminder to all workers that knowing the rules is not enough. They must also follow them, even when it feels hard or unfair. Rules about giving away food may seem small, but for businesses, they are part of a larger structure designed to keep everything in balance. The person who received the free food was someone known in the public eye, a fact that added an unexpected layer of complexity to the situation. In the world of customer service, When an employee serves someone who is well known, it can sometimes feel like a special moment. It's not uncommon for employees to be excited or eager to please customers, especially if they are famous or influential. For an employee working in a fast food restaurant, serving a person who has a name that people recognize might feel like a chance to do something unique or make a lasting impression. However, despite the personal nature of the act, the rules of the company still applied. When this person received free food, it may have seemed like a harmless and friendly gesture. After all, who would argue about giving food to someone well-liked or admired by many? But even though it might have seemed like an innocent act, the situation became more complicated because of the person's status in the public eye. As a public figure, any action that involves them tends to attract attention, whether it's good or bad. This is a reminder of how actions in the public eye can become more than just personal moments. They can lead to broader discussions. When a well-known individual is involved, people start to ask questions, and the event becomes part of a larger conversation. In this case, the fact that the individual was publicly recognized made the incident more significant than it might have been otherwise. If the same food was given to an average customer, the event might have been overlooked or forgotten quickly. But because of the public status of the person who received the food, the situation began to attract attention. People who heard about it might have been curious about why the employee made that decision, and many could have wondered whether the act was justified. It's possible that those who followed the public figure might have been curious to know more, and social media, news outlets, or even word of mouth could have helped spread the story. The fact that the person involved had a certain level of public influence meant that the story had the potential to become much larger than expected. In some ways, their recognition gave the incident an added weight. It was no longer just about an employee breaking a company rule. It was about how someone with influence could respond to a situation where a policy was broken on their behalf. This could change how people saw the event. Instead of focusing on the rule violation alone, attention might shift to how the public figure reacted and what kind of message that sent to others. This dynamic shows how closely public figures are connected to their actions and the actions of those around them. The way a public figure responds to an event like this can have lasting effects. Their behavior can either reinforce or challenge existing norms. In some cases, people might expect a public figure to stay quiet and let the situation play out without much involvement. However, when they decide to take action, especially if it involves defending or helping someone, it can change the direction of the story. It's important to note that public figures, knowingly or unknowingly, influence the larger community, and their reactions in situations like this are closely watched by many. The fact that the individual was a public figure made it more likely that their actions would resonate with a broader audience. This is a reminder of how people with influence can change the tone of an entire story. A single decision, like standing up for someone or offering support in a difficult situation, can have a ripple effect. The public figure might not have planned for their response to gain so much attention, but because of their position, everything they do is scrutinized, often leading to a wider discussion of the issues at hand. In this case, the person receiving the food did not simply remain passive. Instead, they became involved in the story, offering their perspective or taking a stance that could make people think more deeply about the situation. Their involvement meant the situation was no longer just about an employee and their job. It became about larger questions regarding fairness, corporate policy, and human compassion. This act, small in the eyes of the company but large in the eyes of the public, had the potential to change how people viewed workplace rules and how they felt about kindness versus authority in a business setting. In the end, the involvement of the public figure highlighted an important point. Sometimes the right thing to do might not align with what a company sees as right under its policies. This difference between company rules and personal morality is something that many people have to deal with at some point in their careers, and it can often lead to conflict. The key lesson here is that public figures, due to their visibility, often face more attention than most people in similar situations. Their actions in such events can turn a small problem into a much larger conversation about ethics, fairness, and how businesses treat their employees. When a company has clear policies in place, especially regarding how employees should conduct themselves, those policies are meant to maintain fairness and consistency across the organization. These rules are set up to ensure that every employee follows the same guidelines, regardless of their personal beliefs or who they may be serving. In the case of fast food restaurants, where employees interact with many customers every day, it is vital to have rules that are strictly followed. Policies regarding free food are one of the most common rules because food costs are carefully managed, and giving food away without proper authorization can lead to financial losses. Even small acts, like offering a free meal, can disrupt the system, which is why companies enforce such rules strictly. This situation became a turning point when an employee made the decision to break that rule and give away food without seeking approval. The company's response was swift and consistent. With its standard practice, the employee was fired. While it may have seemed like a harsh decision, the company had no choice but to take action. If they allowed one employee to break the rule, it would send a message to others that such behavior could be acceptable. That could create a domino effect, where other employees might start bending or breaking the rules, leading to chaos within the business. Therefore, the company needed to show that no one is above the rules, and the consequences for breaking them were serious. It wasn't just the action of giving away food that mattered, it was the principle behind the action. By making an exception in one case, the employee unintentionally put the entire system at risk. In businesses, especially large corporations, there is always a need for consistency in how rules are enforced. If one person is allowed to disregard company policy, other employees might believe that they too can break the rules without facing consequences. This behavior can weaken the trust between employees and management, and it can also damage the reputation of the business. A company's policies are there not only to protect the business from loss, but also to maintain fairness among all employees. If exceptions are made too often, employees might feel that some people are treated better than others, which can lead to dissatisfaction and low morale. Firing the employee wasn't just a reaction to the one action. It was a way of sending a clear message to everyone working in the company that rules are important and will be enforced. In a large chain like McDonald's, this kind of message needs to be communicated clearly to maintain order. If rules are treated like suggestions, there's no way to ensure that every employee will act in the best interest of the company. By enforcing strict policies, the company ensures that every employee knows what is expected and that there is no room for personal judgment calls when it comes to company rules. It creates an environment where everyone understands the boundaries and the consequences of crossing them. For the employee, this situation served as a reminder of how important it is to follow company rules, even if they don't seem to make sense in the moment. The decision to give away food may have been driven by a feeling of generosity or kindness, but it showed how difficult it can be to balance personal judgment with company expectations. Employees may sometimes feel torn between doing what feels right to them and following what they know the company expects. However, the key lesson here is that the company's rules exist for a reason, and when employees choose to disregard them, they risk not only their own position but also the stability of the entire operation. While the employee's action might have been well-intentioned, it was ultimately seen as a violation of trust. When a company hires someone, it is not just about the work they do, but also about their ability to adhere to the rules that keep the business running smoothly. Companies place a great deal of trust in their employees to follow procedures and make decisions that are aligned with the organization's values. By breaking the rule, the employee damaged that trust, and as a result, the company had to take appropriate action to restore the balance. In any business, trust is one of the most valuable commodities, and when it is broken, it can take a long time to rebuild. The decision to fire the employee also highlighted the importance of personal responsibility. As part of a team, every worker is expected to contribute to the success of the company, and that includes respecting the rules that have been put in place. It's easy to think that one small act won't make a difference, but in reality, every small decision counts. One person's actions can have far-reaching effects on the company's reputation and operations. The employee's decision to break the rule may have seemed minor in the moment, but it had lasting consequences for them, for their colleagues, and for the company as a whole. This event also brings attention to the challenges of working within a set of rules that don't always seem to match one's personal beliefs. Employees often face situations where they must choose between what they think is right and what the company dictates. It can be a difficult decision, but in most cases, businesses expect employees to follow the rules, even if they don't fully agree with them. The key is understanding that policies are put in place to ensure fairness, consistency, and protection for everyone involved. The company's responsibility is to maintain its structure and uphold the rules, and the employee's responsibility is to respect those rules, even when the choices seem hard. When the firing happened, it could have been seen as the end of the matter, but that was not the case. The response to the situation came from someone who was involved in the event, and their actions were unexpected. Instead of simply accepting the outcome, they decided to take a stand and do something that changed the course of the story. This was a clear example of how a simple act can lead to a much bigger conversation, especially when a person with influence chooses to act in a way that challenges the status quo. The decision to speak up or take action in a way that was not anticipated made the situation much more significant. The individual involved could have chosen to stay quiet and let things unfold without further involvement. After all, many people might have assumed that their role was finished once the food was given away and the employee was fired. However, their choice to speak out or take action demonstrated that they were not just passive recipients of events, but active participants in how things progressed. By deciding to step forward, they shifted the focus of the story away from a simple workplace rule violation and turned it into something much more impactful. This person had the ability to bring attention to larger questions about fairness, the application of rules, and the treatment of employees. What made the response so striking was that it was not just about defending the employee who had been fired. It was about addressing the core issue at hand. This person could have easily chosen to remain neutral or ignore the situation, but instead, they used their platform or influence to draw attention to a deeper issue, one that many people might have overlooked in favor of focusing only on the incident itself. In doing so, they raised questions about the fairness of strict company policies and whether there was room for compassion in decision-making processes, especially when dealing with employees who may have acted with good intentions. This decision to take action also highlighted the power of individuals who are in the public eye. When someone with influence takes a stand, it can lead to a much broader discussion. The response did not just affect the company or the employee involved, but reached a wider audience who began to consider the implications of the situation. It sparked a conversation about the role of employers in treating their staff fairly and with understanding. People often look up to those in the public eye, and when those individuals make bold decisions, it can inspire others to reconsider their views and take action in similar situations. By responding in such a striking way, the individual showed that they understood the responsibility that comes with having a platform. They used their influence not just to speak out for someone who had been wronged, but to draw attention to the broader issues that are often overlooked in everyday business practices. Their decision to get involved changed the narrative, turning it from a simple incident of rule-breaking into a discussion about how businesses treat employees and the importance of understanding the human side of decisions. It became about more than just food or a fired employee. It became about the way that corporate rules can sometimes ignore the intentions or needs of the people who are following them. This kind of response often has a ripple effect. When one person takes a stand and challenges the way things are, it can inspire others to do the same. The individual's actions encouraged others to look beyond the surface of the situation and think about what might have led to it in the first place. People began to question whether the strict enforcement of rules was always the best approach, or if there could be room for flexibility and understanding in certain circumstances. This type of leadership, even if it was unexpected, shows how one person's actions can shift the direction of a conversation and lead to a larger cultural shift in how issues are approached. The response also underlined the idea that sometimes the right thing to do may not always align with the expected or traditional response. While many would have expected the situation to end with the firing of the employee and little to no further discussion, the person involved chose to speak out and raise awareness. This decision brought to light an important lesson about standing up for what is fair and questioning policies that might not always serve everyone equally. It reminded people that businesses are not just about rules and profits. They are about people too, and those people deserve to be treated with respect and understanding. This act of response was not just a reaction to the firing itself, but an attempt to bring balance to a situation that many might have accepted as being final and resolved. It was an example of how one person, when they choose to take a stand, can change the outcome of an event and inspire others to think more deeply about the consequences of their actions. In doing so, they reminded everyone that sometimes the system needs to be questioned, especially when it fails to take into account the human element involved. The response to the situation was not just about the immediate aftermath of the employee's firing. It became a powerful moment that sparked a larger conversation. What happened next was not what anyone might have expected. Instead of simply letting the incident be forgotten, the person who received the free food decided to do something that would capture attention and change the direction of the story. This response, though surprising to many, turned the situation from a simple rule violation into a significant moment that made people rethink what they had just witnessed. The actions taken by this individual were not just about standing up for the employee. They challenged the very framework of the corporate policies that led to the firing in the first place. What made this response so powerful was that it wasn't just about the immediate issue. It became about the values and principles that guided the decision to fire the employee. Instead of treating the situation as an isolated incident, the individual used their position to highlight larger concerns about fairness, the human element in business decisions, and the need for businesses to be more compassionate and understanding when it comes to their employees. By taking this action, they shifted the conversation from focusing on a small mistake to questioning whether the strict application of rules was always the right way to handle every situation. Their actions brought attention to the idea that company policies are not always perfect, and they may not always account for the complexities of human behavior. In this case, the employee's actions might have been driven by kindness, a desire to help someone, or even an impulse to do something positive in a situation. However, because the company's policies were rigid, the employee's good intentions led to a harsh punishment. This opened up a discussion about whether policies should allow room for understanding and flexibility, especially when it involves employees who may act with good hearts but go against the rules. The person's response made it clear that the focus should not just be on the strict enforcement of rules, but also on recognizing the motivations behind actions and finding a balance between the two. Moreover, by taking action, this individual made a point that there is power in using one's platform to make a difference. The response was not just about making a statement, it was about standing up for what they believed was right and using their influence to inspire others to think critically about the situation. It wasn't enough to let the company's decision stand without question. Instead, they chose to take a proactive role and challenge the situation, showing others that it's okay to question authority when it's necessary. This brought the situation into the public spotlight, where others could examine it more closely and begin to ask if corporate policies were always just, and if there was room for kindness and understanding in the workplace. This act of taking a stand was more than just an individual gesture. It had the power to influence others. It encouraged others to look at the situation from a different perspective and question how business decisions are made. It served as a reminder that policies are not always perfect and can sometimes lead to unfair outcomes. This opened the door to discussions about whether businesses should adopt a more human-centered approach to their policies and consider the emotions and intentions of their employees when making decisions. Instead of viewing employees as just rule followers or machines who must follow policies without question, the response highlighted the importance of treating them as individuals with emotions, personal motives, and good intentions. The actions of this individual also showcased the importance of standing up for others, especially when they are in a vulnerable position. The employee who had been fired was not in a position of power, and their future was uncertain. By responding in such a way, this person used their influence to bring attention to the larger issue of fairness and the importance of supporting people who might be unjustly treated. In a world where corporate decisions often prioritize profit over people, this response served as a reminder that businesses must not forget the human aspect of their work. Furthermore, this decision brought attention to the broader implications of corporate policies and their impact on employees. The firing might have seemed like a routine response, a standard action that the company had to take to maintain order. However, when viewed through a different lens, it became clear that the Osoya company's policies may have overlooked the very nature of human kindness and the complexities of individual actions. By taking a stand, the person involved revealed how rigid corporate policies could sometimes fail to account for the nuances of human behavior and the need for empathy in decision-making. This situation also illustrated the power of one individual to bring attention to an issue that others might have ignored. While the company saw the act of giving away free food as a violation of policy, the response highlighted how a simple decision could affect someone's life and bring about larger conversations. The individual's actions were a call for others to reflect on the deeper meaning behind company rules and to question whether they truly serve the best interests of everyone involved. Their response turned what could have been a simple incident into a larger conversation about fairness, compassion, and the importance of understanding the bigger picture.